Taelon Peter gets a two-way with the Pacers. Is the Pacers roster done? Is free agency over? Why did they let Enrique Freeman leave? We have so much to get to on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Congrats. You made it through the week, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, the Pacers roster might be done. It's July 25th. They have 15 players. They have 3 two-way players, and Taelon Peter gets spot 18. Of course, they can carry 21 in the offseason, but their team makes sense. Why did they sign Taelon Peter? Does it make sense? Where does this put them long-term? Could they do anything else? What does this mean for Enrique Freeman? Because like I suggested yesterday, they sneakily did something with him earlier in the week that suggests, does not confirm, but suggests, we'll talk about it, he will not be back with the Pacers. And I want to do one more detail I haven't talked about with Isaiah Jackson's contract on here and really finish the scene of free agency until the Pacers make another move of any significance, which might not happen at all. And then at the end, we got to talk about one more interview that I didn't get to yesterday. As the Pacers just have a tour de media going on this week, Johnny Furphy had a long, nearly 10-minute ESPN appearance with Kane Pittman on ESPN Australia. That was quite fun. We'll talk about that. Of course, at the end, if you missed it yesterday, Chad Buchanan on Setting the Pace, Tyrese Haliburton on the Pat McAfee Show. I talked to Rick Carlisle and TJ McConnell wrote in the Players Tribune, and you're hearing from everybody in Pacerland this week. Okay, speaking of Pacerland, I thought it could come soonish. I talked about last year how this is about the timing they made some two-way moves when Summer League ended, and they had clarity. Summer League is over. They have clarity. Taelon Peter, the 54th overall pick in the 2025 draft by the Pacers, gets the final two-way slot with the Pacers. A 2-year deal. Very interesting. It's not rare that a player gets a 2-year two-way out of the draft. I think I'd have to go back and check every single two-way that they've done to start a season, but I don't remember off the top of my head any two-way player entering the season on a 2-year deal that they've ever had. Maybe Kendall Brown did, but he was injured coming into his rookie year. It's not a typical thing for the Pacers to do this to start. Obviously, Edmund Sumner was hurt as well, but like a healthy player that they've picked, usually it's a 1-year thing and they kind of assess year by year. Not that that's that telling, but if you like Taelon Peter, you should be happy about this. If you have no opinion of him, then great. They have 2 years potential to develop him now. There's obviously very little to no penalty to just waive a two-way player, but Taelon Peter gets the last spot. Why? Well, obviously they liked him enough to draft him, and they should, in that case, like him enough to keep him on the team. I wondered, given that they had so many, and by so many, I mean 4, balls in the air for a two-way with 3 players who get it, right? You have 3 two-way slots. Ray J. Dennis entered the offseason on a two-way, and they liked his summer league. Chad Buchanan said that on Setting the Pace. Quentin Jackson was a restricted free agent. He's clearly the best of these 4 players that we'll talk about. Enrique Freeman became a restricted free agent. He's good. And they potentially needed center depth, although we'll talk about Enrique later. And, of course, Taelon Peter. I just wondered if Peter was not that impressive in summer league, if it's possible they would have just stashed him in the G League, which is unusual but does happen for a project-type player. But then he played well. This is what sealed the deal that he should get a two-way. They picked him, and he had a good summer league, right? And what made his summer league so fascinating is if you go back and listen, before summer league, when I was kind of previewing what I wanted to see or what the Pacers should hope to see out of their key players who are playing in Vegas, guys who have a tangible chance to impact their team short and long term, with Taelon Peter, it was about anything but the shooting, right? I'm not saying that it's a guarantee he's going to be efficient in the NBA. Just because a guy shot well in college doesn't mean it's a guarantee they will be a good shooter in the NBA. Obviously, it gives him a higher chance. But I think that everybody kind of understands that that's why he got picked. And I've watched him in practice. His jumper looks very nice. It did not go in summer league very often. He went, he shot 26.7% from the field in his summer league games. 4 for 15 from 3. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it matters what he did on 15 threes in summer league. He made 57.1% of his overall shots, so his twos went in. But regardless of that, I said, I want to see if he does anything else of note, right? Is Taelon Peter good enough at other stuff, or does he show enough basketball skill or intelligence that makes me think, yes, this is somebody the Pacers should want to try to develop beyond the gaudy efficiency stats that make him an analytics master? And the answer was undeniably yes, 100%. Flashing green light, green flag, whatever the trend is. Yes, right? That's what Chad Buchanan talked about earlier this week too, is, the twos went in. He made every free throw he took. He had a good enough nose for the ball on the glass despite being 6'3". He's listed at 6'4". Everybody's listed a little taller. Like, I stood by him. He's 6'2", 6'3"-ish. He was good enough moving the ball. In fact, my biggest criticism of him through all of summer league was he didn't shoot it enough. He'd be open and he'd make, and very quickly, by the way, it never stuck with him, make the right read with a pass, put it on the floor, keep the defense at least going, or keep the defense thinking and active, which is very Pacers-y in their current era. And it wasn't like he was moving it quickly and making a mistake. He was just getting it to the next station, which is a very basic play to make, but is the right play a lot of the time. Of course, it's like Ben Shepherd's rookie year where they're going to have to tell him, dude, shoot if you're open, but that's good. He moved the ball well. His turnovers were not problematic. And I would say most importantly, for somebody of his kind of size, he was able to actually battle and stand guys up defensively and stay in front of them. And he got killed on a few screens. Certainly, every single rookie's team, like every time I deep dive rookies, which I haven't had to do for a few years because the Pacers haven't had a high pick for a while. But like every young player, I think kind of stinks at team defense, right? Especially in college basketball, they don't pay attention enough. They're too floaty. When the game gets going fast, they're just out of sorts, right? In summer league, these dudes have been playing together for a week, and it's a chaotic environment. And like every young guy in this setting looks like their team defense is not very good, right? If their team defense looks awesome, that's a great sign that they're going to be a good defender. So I think the two probably worst parts of Taelon Peter in Vegas to me where he didn't shoot it enough when open, and his team defense wasn't particularly good. But the context of the team defense makes me go, well, we'll see, right? With the Boom and with the Pacers, now we know that he'll be in those settings because he's signed to a two-way. That's where we'll really learn about those things. But now that I think the Pacers have a better sense of, okay, the analytics are crazy. They've obviously watched him play. He had a draft workout with the team. They believe in that. And they have a baseline of like, okay, we can develop that stocky defensive guy. Or, okay, this guy's going to move the ball well enough to be additive in this system if he hits on some of the other stuff that we drafted him for, right? That's the type of player you want on a two-way deal. If there's a % chance above zero that they become a rotation player someday because of a certain skill, that's worth investing in, right? And I've kind of come to be more of a skill over athleticism guy. It's so easy to say, oh, pick the traits and figure it out. Like, it doesn't work very well. The Pacers have tried it. Kendall Brown didn't work out. Cassius Stanley didn't work out. Amita Brahma was huge. He wasn't really anything. Some guys have it, but like they're already kind of skilled. Pick the skills. In this case for Peter, it's efficiency, and see if you can grow their traits from there. He just so happens to also be athletic, right? 20 dunks last year in college. And showed more of a baseline than I expected, but then more of a baseline than just this guy's going to make shots. So I think he earned it in Vegas, and that made it tenable to move off of someone else. And in this case, it's going to be Enrique Freeman. We'll talk about that in the next segment. But obviously, I think this makes sense. I think he earned more than just a G League contract, which would have been kind of goofy anyway. And so Taelon Peter, two-way contract, that's 18 for the Pacers. They have 15 players on standard deals, and they have 3 players on two-ways. That is compliant for a regular season team. And the reason this is relevant right now is because like it makes sense. Like, we'll run through the rotation next Monday with Tyler Smith, at least our projections for it. And of course, things could change, but like the 15 players they have make good sense. They have a rotation that makes sense, and they have, full reserves that back it up, and their two-ways add to making a team that makes sense and has a quality number of the right players at the right positions. It makes sense. And so it's possible the Pacers are now done, besides like Exhibit 10s and stuff. We'll talk more about other offseason stuff, but I say that to say, what a free agency. The speed run of 4 weeks. It's always crazy. The Pacers, we will not talk about any moves they make until they do it again, but Taelon Peter deserves the last spot, and they now have multiple years to potentially try to develop him. Maybe this is another Edmund Sumner or one of their Alize Johnson, guys they've drafted late that end up helping them a little bit. Maybe this is something else like Tristan Newton or Enrique Freeman last year who don't have that long-lasting of a time, but this bet makes sense. The signing makes sense, and the Pacers move on. Let's go to the flip side of this. Enrique Freeman does not get a two-way. The second straight year that a center, last year was Oscar Tshiebwe, loses out on the battle for the final two-way spot. This should have been more clear it was coming. Is this the right choice? What's going to happen to Freeman? And let's talk a little bit about Isaiah Jackson, whose contract details are in and are quite favorable and nice to the Pacers. That's all coming up here on Locked On Pacers. Before we get to any of that, we need to talk about game time. Have you ever decided at the last minute you want to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's a game day. You suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you could splurge on food or drinks or merch or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible, and they make ticket buying fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. They've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. It's the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game. Tired of endless scrolling to find the best deal? Well, Game Time has zone deals. They pick the best seats in your section for you. Seat views on the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you'll be. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, entering the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Make your second listen. Man, a lot going on. But Locked On Celtics, they have J.D. Davison, and you're going to hear about them again in a second. They've had a fascinating offseason. Locked On Celtics with John Krause. Okay, Enrique Freeman. What happened here? He did not get, or has not gotten at least, a contract with the Pacers. So on Tuesday, here's the thing. He got a qualifying offer and entered restricted free agency. And so that meant at any time he could have signed that qualifying offer, been under a two-way contract with the Pacers, albeit with extremely light guarantees. And if he had just done that without talking to the Pacers first, they would have just like cut him and been like, okay, why did you do that? So it's not like it was a real offer, right? It's not like other qualifying offers that like actually have significant guaranteed money. But they wouldn't have given him that qualifying offer if he didn't have a chance to be a part of their future. After July 13th every year, a team can no longer just take away a qualifying offer from a player without the player, like they can't unilaterally do that. The player has to be involved in that decision or their representation. If you remember with Cassius Stanley, 5 years ago, would that be? 5 years ago, he was playing in Summer League for the Pacers and then got his qualifying offer pulled on the last day. The Pacers could do it without his consent, and then he obviously did not return to the Pacers. It was after the 13th. It was this Tuesday. I think it was the 22nd. The Pacers withdrew Freeman's qualifying offer. And so that's a perk your eyebrows up kind of moment. And then Chad Buchanan saying on a podcast that came out the day before that Taelon Peter's getting the last two-way. It should have been a sign that Freeman is probably not coming back. And the fact that he was willing to have, albeit an extremely small amount of guaranteed money, literally taken away from him so he could be unrestricted, just does suggest that he is going to be somewhere else. And he doesn't fit with what the Pacers roster structure is right now, unless what I would have done happens and, the Pacers would waive Tony Bradley and then Quentin Jackson gets a standard and Enrique Freeman gets a two-way. That would have been what I would have done. However, like I said the whole time, Enrique Freeman is not better than any of the Pacers' actual four centers they have right now. It's not like a crime that he's not going to be back. Which is now my operating assumption, by the way. And he turns 25 in 4 days, right? He is older. It's not like an obvious development project, but he is good, right? That's the part of here's the tricky part. Like the same thing I said on the Summer League breakdown with Alex Golden, 73% shooting on a double-double in Vegas. He was very productive. He also is a 6'7" center, right? He'll be fighting that his entire career. So there's something there. I think he deserves another shot in an organization to try to become something. And I bet, I don't know this. I do not know anything. I'm never certain of anything in the NBA. I learned a lesson about projecting certainty with Miles Turner this free agency because I assumed he'd be back. But I would bet that Enrique Freeman has a couple spots that he could pick from in terms of his next home that's actually in the NBA. Maybe not a standard deal, but a two-way or something that he likes as a spot to get another chance because of that productivity, right? And so if he doesn't have an obvious spot coming with the Pacers, who have 4 other centers in his way, like even if he has 3 other teams wanting his services and the Pacers want to keep him, the Pacers may not be even the best spot for him, right? So if you're Enrique Freeman, you might be thinking, dang, maybe somewhere else makes more sense for me. So if you were the biggest Enrique Freeman fan, you might be happy, depending on if he lands somewhere else. That's just my guess, given the way the order of events has gone here. Did the Pacers make a mistake losing him? I mean, I guess it depends how good he becomes, right? Is anyone right now listening? There were a ton of huge Oscar Tshiebwe fans. Like, it's been a year. No one is like, what were they thinking? He actually played okay for the Jazz. He's just who he is, right? Like, that might be what Freeman is. This might just be the player he is. He's obviously a late bloomer. He walked on in college, but, I'll be very curious what happens with him. Time will tell if it's a mistake to just straight up lose him, but he has certain size limitations that make it hard for him to be better than actual center-sized players unless he develops more perimeter skills. Those hadn't quite come enough yet, right? He would have been their 5th best center. He would barely have played. I think his productivity merited at least a chance at developing him for another year, but I understand why the Pacers did not. It is not the end of the world. I think Taelon Peter deserved a 2A. I'm not saying they made a mistake by signing someone else instead of Freeman, unless they would have made other corresponding moves. Of course, we've heard now that Tony Bradley's going to be in camp, so this just makes sense. So there's been a couple small moves made around the league with players getting waived recently. Like Boston, who waived J.D. Davison, I mentioned coming into this segment, like actually is a good fit. Their centers are Luka Garza, Xavier Tillman, and Nehemias Queta right now. And they only have one, I believe, 2-way slot filled at the moment, maybe 2. So it is totally possible to me that like the Celtics make sense. There's lots of teams that could make sense. They just made a move today, and I was like, why did they do that? And I was looking through what their team is, who their 2-ways are. So they also have an Exhibit 10 Hayden Gray, but not relevant to this. So we'll see what happens with Freeman, but I would guess that he does land somewhere else. Who knows on what kind of deal, and gets another shot. So that's the Pacers' final decision made between those 2 players. They have 18 now, like I said. We'll talk about anything that happens in free agency as it happens, should it be relevant. Anything else talked about from an offseason perspective will be about other stuff. Team options, extensions, Exhibit 10s, trades, the works. Could the Pacers still sign a veteran point guard? It's possible. Yeah, they'd have to create a camp competition to do it, but they did that with Cole Swider and Kendall Brown last year. But until that happens, there's nothing to project. There's nothing else to talk about. We have buried in dirt every single Pacers free agency topic to this point. So let's talk about the other thing that happened that I haven't mentioned yet. The Pacers signed Isaiah Jackson. We have talked about that. 3-year deal at a little higher value than I thought he'd get. And in talking and hearing other people talk about it, a little higher than a lot of people thought he'd get. But clearly that signals the Pacers really like him, obviously. And it's not like an unfair deal. So in this contract, there are injury protections where if he has another Achilles injury on that same one, the Pacers could get out of it. That's very ever rarely. That's allowed to be in lots of contracts. Lots of players have gotten that. I can't remember a time since I've been covering the NBA that's actually mattered, which means that's a good thing. That means player health has been good under those contracts. So that's thing one. The other part of this is it's very small, but because the Pacers were farther from the tax than anyone anticipated because they don't have Miles Turner, they actually did something that they don't do that often. This is a descending contract. It starts almost as high as it possibly could have in year one at $7.6 million and then goes down next year and down the following year. So for a team that might have to consider what to do with Ben Mathurin next year, then Jarris Walker and Ben Shepherd the following year, and then other guys, Aaron Nesmith the year after that, you're constantly evaluating who deserves and who does not deserve raises. Having a player's salary go down as the cap goes up creates even more wiggle room to potentially add stuff. It's not a lot. It's $600,000 extra here and there, but that's half of a minimum or something like that could matter a decent amount. So using the flexibility the Pacers have now is smart. People have talked about disabled player exception this and mid-level that. Like, this reduces the chance that they could use all of that, which clearly suggests, and I think we already knew this, that this was done with future seasons in mind over this one. But I wondered this the day after the signing, like, oh, they could have made this descending. Did they do that? The answer is yes, that they did. I think that's smart given their current situation and forward thinking. And again, now if he's less effective because of this or that thing related to the injury, great. It gets less and less punitive to have this contract on the books going forward, even again by a small amount. So smart business there from the Pacers, and good for Jackson to get the most money up front. Nice compromise for the Pacers who have the extra space to do something like that now. Fiend, put your pencils down. Free agency is done for the Pacers. Their team makes sense. We'll see if they do anything else unless something awesome falls in their lap. I would suspect that everything else you hear about is small or tiny. Johnny Furphy deserved an interview. I think he went on ESPN Australia with Kane Pittman, the former Locked On Bucks host who now works for ESPN Australia. I think it was his first interview since the dunk against the Bulls. It was very fun to hear him talk about it and many other Pacers topics. I won't go through the whole thing, but we got to talk about it to close out the week of Pacers interviews, topics du jour, to close out this week's episodes of Locked On Pacers. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day your second listen. Poof. I mean, there's a lot of small things going on here and there in the NBA, but Chris Paul is back. He's on the Clippers. That could be your second listen. Hear from the Clippers about being the oldest team. I believe I read this from Tom Haberstroh in NBA history. Oof. I like their offseason, and I hear that, and I'm like, oh, do I really like their offseason? That's very scary. I wouldn't want to be the oldest team in NBA history. Locked On Clippers, we'll have more on that, but I quite like the players that they have. And Locked On Warriors, because Jonathan Kuminga, what on earth is going on? Is he really going to sign the qualifying offer? Ooh, that is a crazy situation. Locked On Warriors, we'll have more. Okay, the interviews have been popping. Chad Buchanan, Rick Carlisle, TJ McConnell, Tyrese Haliburton. You can hear about those yesterday. Today, it's Johnny Furphy time. Very good stuff from Kane and Furphy, who also, importantly, at the end of this interview, cleared up that Jacob Furphy, the UConn commit, is not related to Johnny Furphy, despite a broadcast error that they are brothers. They are not. They're very, very, very distantly related. Basically not related at all. But there were actually relevant questions to Johnny Furphy. He talked about his first season being kind of full of ups and downs, and he'll obviously remember it for forever. And we all know that part, the finals. He played in 50 games. He played for the Mad Ants. Some of it was good. Some of it was bad. I liked the word he used when he talked about Summer League this year. Obviously, he was more comfortable, like he knew what was coming. And he was kind of told by the Pacers to go in with a mindset of knowing that to project like he's the best player. And you could see that, right? You could see the experience. You could see that he played like he was the best player, and it showed. He looked like the best player quite often on the floor. I don't know how he can carry that mentality to real NBA games where he won't be the best player, but that mentality served him well. I like that approach from the Pacers. The other word he said that I really liked was that he felt like year 2 Summer League was less stressful. Like a lot of guys talk about it being chaotic or new, or they're just exhausted from pre-draft going right into whatever. Stressful was a good way to put it. It's not so much new information. You're not putting a lot of pressure on yourself to perform, for a contract or for a role or for a first impression or whatever. I liked that term, and I'll be curious how, I might ask Kim Jones about this. Like, did it feel stressful out there? Who knows? In terms of actually new stuff, he said he got a lot of good experiences in Vegas learning about leadership. And he says he feels like he's just scratching the surface of his size, which is really interesting. Scott Agnes was out there in Vegas with me during the second game, and he was asking Furphy about that. And he was like, yeah, I do feel like I still have a lot of room to continue growing after already adding 20 pounds. And Isaac Jacob, the head coach of that Summer League team, has talked about that, what surprised him is he gained the 20 pounds, but it hasn't impacted his game at all. Like, he's still just as bouncy, his shots the same, all that. Like, that's rare. Furphy said a lot of the coaches have been surprised by his growth just because he's been on the court so much. Like, obviously he's been in the weight room trying to get bigger, but he went from what he was last year to now with a lot of just straight up on court work to improve his body and skill. And that's maybe not unusual, but it's just kind of surprised people how it's hit him. So I'll be curious how a full offseason of attempting to get larger, it's only been half the offseason so far. And for the Pacers, it's been like a month, whereas other teams have had many months, how that really impacts what he looks like when the season starts. I'll put the full interview with Kane down in the description if you want to watch the whole thing, because there's so much more about all of that to get into. And then, of course, I'm thrilled because for the first time since the Bulls game, I believe this is the first time he's had comments. He had like autograph signings and stuff after lots of games, but this was his first time talking about the dunk. And he was asked directly, is it the best of his career? Because he talked about it after the game, I think, with a couple of people, and he wasn't sure in the moment, like how big it was and how viral it got, or if it was the best dunk of his career. He said, yes, it is this time. So it is a high bar to beat. The dunk on Goga last year was like awesome. This was way better, to be clear. The setting is way different. Like the Goga dunk was a real game with sort of consequence. Actually, no, that was the game that both the Magic and Pacers were playing for nothing. But two nasty dunks, right? He didn't realize, he said, how kind of huge and epic it was until after the game. Like all of his Pacers teammates are like, dude, you have to see this. Like, you have to look at this. And they show him the photo of Essengay and all that. And that's when he kind of realized it. That's when Furphy said he realized it was like different, right? It was very funny to him. He hopes to have one like that in what he called a real game, which made me laugh because he has the Batadze dunk, which was that a real game? Like it was a real game. It was a regular season game, but like I said, it was a 4-0 moment. But I got a kick out of him not realizing how like big of a dunker that he is now. Like he's got some hops. He's fearless going towards the basket. Like he had lots of really awesome dunks in summer league. I kind of hope that translates to the NBA. Put him in the dunk contest, man. Who cares? What's he got to lose? He said later too that in that Magic game that I talked about earlier, that a ref came up to him like after the dunk on Goga and said, well, congrats. Like you're going to be on SportsCenter for that. And being from Australia and like being younger, he's like, what are you talking about? What are you even saying? Like he had no idea what top 10 was or anything like that. I think that one made top 10, but the Bulls one that just happened was literally the number one play on SportsCenter. Well deserved. It was awesome. He also later praised Haliburton, of course, for his personality and passion for the game and how it kind of trickles over to the whole team. Being around Ty, I could not agree more. And the last thing I put down of note, this was his first offseason, right? Like these rookies get drafted and like the summer happens, but they don't know what's going on. They don't know their teammates yet. This was his first time seeing free agency. And of course he loses Miles Turner. So he said, it's crazy what a few weeks can do. I thought that was very fascinating to hear as his first free agency is now over. Again, I'll put the link to this full 10-minute segment on ESPN Australia in the description if you want to watch it yourself. There was plenty more talked about than everything I just said, but I was glad to hear him talk about the dunk for the first time. And I couldn't talk about Taelon Peter for 20 minutes, so I'm glad we could talk about what Johnny Furphy had to say. But the end of free agency, the end of the Pacers tour to interviews that have randomly popped up since Summer League ended, and the end of a week here on Locked On Pacers. I've skipped one day since the playoffs started, since really the end of the regular season for the Pacers, but back to normal schedule here. So we're just going to go no shows this weekend. We'll be back on Monday with Tyler Smith. We already recorded it earlier today, talking and projecting the Pacers rotation for the coming season. I thought that would come out today, but then the Taelon Peter stuff happened, so that's coming first. And then next week, I have most of the shows planned out pending some returned emails, and we'll get going into the offseason with all sorts of stuff that we do every summer so you can get to know the new players a little bit more, figure out some questions to ask about guys, look ahead. It's time to look ahead to the upcoming season and do some zany things here on Locked On Pacers. Thank you guys so much for listening today. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Tony R. Reese. This podcast is on Twitter at Locked On Pacers and Instagram under the same handle. Have a great weekend. Back Monday, talking more Pacers with Tyler Smith. Till then, everybody, have a wonderful day.